Winter Roses, Autumn by Fairytalelovr. Chapter 8. With all of his duties, it took Mr. Lewin 3 days to sort through Mr. Wallace's old scrolls and the records from Winterfell's ledgers. And he was now 10 times more worried than he had been when he had first heard Lord and Lady Stark talking. He signed his name to the letter and put the quill down with a resigned sigh. He hadn't been back to the Citadel ever since his appointment to Winterfell, but he still knew who he could trust at this moment. So he gathered the scrolls that would prove his words and went to the Lord Solar. "I have a confession to make, my lord," Maester Lewin said, making Ned nervous. "The day of Lady Stark's arrival, I was bringing you the ledgers you had requested, and I ended up overhearing your conversation." Ned stiffened, but the Maester only continued. "I know I should have made my presence known, but I was quite shocked at what I heard, so I couldn't manage to walk away. I trespassed, and I have nothing to say for myself, other than I am sorry, and reassure you that you need not worry about my loyalty." Ella set a hand on her husband's shoulder. "And what did you hear, Maester?" she asked. The man flushed and looked down, thinking on how to answer. "That you are Lord Starling's mother, of course, my lady." It was Jory who answered, drawing all eyes to him. "And you met in Dorne after the Lady Lyanna had perished from that fever. That is, after all there is to be said on the matter." Silence took over the room as Lord and Lady took in the implications. "I presume you have a reason for confessing to your indiscretion only 3 days later, Maester," Ella finally said. "I do. After hearing what I heard, I retrieved a trunk of Mr. Wallace's correspondence, and even his journal. I am very sorry to say that I am ashamed and deeply disturbed by what I had discovered." "And what did you discover?" Ned asked. "I already know it was Mr. Wallace who whispered in my father's ears about betrothing Brandon and Lyanna to the south. What else could there be?" "Lady Stark said rebellion had been in the making for years." "And so it had," Lewin said. "This particular scheme has been in the making since the moment Aegon Targaryen and his sisters first conquered Westeros, and no one ever suspected it." "What scheme?" Ned asked. "The Maesters," Ella said. "They hate magic. They hated the dragons. They were the ones conspiring?" Maester Lewin nodded. "I've found enough records that prove that the Maesters wanted to use the growing discontent, form these alliances, and have them rise in rebellion against the throne. I imagine they couldn't have hoped to be so successful." "Just a moment," Ned said. "Are you telling us that the Citadel held a 300-year-long conspiracy against House Targaryen?" The Maester passed over Maester Wallace's old journal and opened it in the bookmarked page, pointing to the right passage. "Lord Rickard is wavering now. The silly girl, his too wilful and annoying daughter, has declared she will not marry Lord Brandon, for he is, in her own words, a rude pig of a man who thinks to honour me is to buy me expensive gifts. That and the gossip about his bastard in the Vale, and a possible other in the Crown lands, having given her the knowledge that Lord Baratheon would be a terrible husband, and that she would rather die alone than be married to such a man. Obviously, Lord Rickard tried to dissuade her of this nonsense and tell her it was only hearsay, but I know the man. He will allow her to convince him soon enough, and then the alliance will fall apart. He always lets her do whatever she pleases. He is too soft for his children. Always has been. So I am worried. especially because Lord Eddard is home now, and not even he, a close friend to Lord Baratheon, was able to convince the stubborn girl. Lady Liara's death was regretful in this, then, because at least she would have been able to mould the she-wolf into a proper lady, instead of a wild girl who fancies herself as good as a man. I know I must keep Lord Rickard on the plan, but how? Aerys Targaryen's madness has provided us with better cause than we have ever had. Well, we had cause during the days of Maegor, but they still had dragons, and the fire-breathing monstrosities that we were only able to get rid of 100 years later. Now they are dragons in name and sigil only, and if we get this block alliance made, then House Targaryen is fallen, and finally, and gone with it all the damned traces of the cursed magic. Maester Cressin is certain that Robert Baratheon will be manageable once on the throne, and Grand Maester Pycelle is indeed very resourceful. So, if we can succeed, well, I would still rather have the Starks upon the throne, since they have a royal lineage, unlike the low-born Tullys, and Baratheons are too close to Targaryens for comfort. So we should need fresh blood, a family that has never before mixed with that scum to renovate the royal family. Therefore, I need to ensure Lord Rickard stays strong, that he forces his Barathi daughter into the sept to marry our stag puppet, and with Lord Brandon marrying the Tully's graceless elder daughter, then the alliance is made. We can rise against the throne and declaw those fireless lizards once and for all.
Maester Wallace wrote this? Ned asked furiously.
I cannot attest to the truth of his hand, my lord, but I did find it in his belongings, Lewin said. There is more. It gets much worse after the great tourney, and all the gossip brought from Harrenhal. In the days before your Lord Father sent the Lady Lyanna to Riverrun, it gets particularly crude. However, there is one thing I found particularly disturbing, and one I deeply regret to share. He ruffled through the pages until the second bookmark.
The scheme is safe for now. Lord Rickard sent the Lady Lyanna to Riverrun. She kicked and yelled and complained, even tripped a guard with the train of her dress. But in the end, she went into the carriage.
She went inside the carriage? Ella asked, shocked. What about Winter?
Oh, the fools! Ned laughed acidly. She was playing them. She was being exiled from her own home because of a marriage alliance she abhorred, and they expected a simple protest would be as far as her reaction would go. My father had no idea who his daughter really was. It would be like me banishing Arya from Winterfell and forcing her to marry Joffrey. Wearing her dress, riding in a carriage. Why did my father believe that was normal? Lyanna would have ripped her skirts off if she were forced to travel in a dress, and she would have been so insufferable if she were kept from riding Winter that she would never have made it to Riverrun, not because she ran away, but because she wouldn't have stopped complaining long enough to leave our courtyard.
So, like that, the matter of the wayward child is taken care of. I doubt Lord Tully will succeed in taming her, but perhaps Lady Catelyn might teach her good sister enough manners. Well, at least there she will be exposed to the Seven, not these barbaric tree gods. At any rate, she will be married to Lord Baratheon, and that will be the end of that. This morning, however, I received a message most disturbing. It seems we should have found a way to prevent that blasted tourney from happening. It was not only the prince's heart that was taken in the event. It seems Lady Ashara of House Dane was successful in charming Lord Eddard. I thought he was so unlike his brother, so honourable and such, but it seems not. Lord Eddard, like Lord Brandon, has started to spread his bastards around the realm. Well, fortunately, we are well versed in handling this issue. Ella felt cold go down her spine. After thinning out House Targaryen to one heir and a weakling child, it will be no trouble at all. The Maester in Starfall has misplaced the letter to Lord Eddard, so he knows nothing of the pregnancy. He still believes he can wait for his brother's marriage before asking his father leave to marry Lady Ashara. And it is very good that Dawn has an abundance of the materials for the necessary potion. If the bastard is strong enough to even be born, it will not live long. After all, we cannot allow for any Targaryen sympathizers. It's enough that the Queen of Thorns meddled, so we were unable to prevent the Tyrell whelps. And besides, the tragedy of a stillborn, if anyone can mourn a bastard at all, will destabilize House Dane, perhaps even keep it away from our war. Although it is regrettable that the Sword of the Morning won't be kept away. Not when he is a Kingsguard. Anyway, it should at least have the Danes at odds with Lord Eddard, since it will seem he did not care for the bastard. Ned pushed the journal away, breathing hard, shaking in anger.
They can't. They
killed my daughter, Ella said. They killed her from inside me.
They murdered an innocent child out of pettiness, Ned exclaimed. I never met my daughter because some bitch decided she was expendable.
Ned,
Ella called. I am going to make them regret this grand conspiracy of theirs.
Ned,
I have half a mind to set the whole of the Citadel aflame, so they can feel what the dragons could do to them.
Ned!
What? They killed our baby girl!
They did. And the monster who fed me that potion is still in Starfall.
Ella wiped off her tears quickly at the knock.
Come in, Rob dear, she called.
Oh, I'm sorry to disturb you. I did not know you were distressed. I will leave you.
No, she said. Come in, love. I know you wouldn't have come for no reason. Tell me, what is it?
Well, seeing you like this only grows my concern, actually. I have just been to Father Solar, and he is very angry about something. I just wanted to make sure he is well. But I think neither of you is.
Ella let a few tears escape.
I didn't want to leave him, but he all but kicked us from the room, saying he wanted to be alone.
Rob came and knelt by her armchair.
What happened? How can I help you?
Ella finally lost her composure and let sobs consume her. Rob was lost on how to help, but then she pulled him into a hug, and he let himself relax into it, as some of the guilt flooded him. No one has hurt him. Well, other than Danny and Marjorie. But they were his sister and his betrothed, since his mother had left.
You have to be more careful, love,
Ella said once the sobs had slowed down and she could talk.
What you did, going beyond the wall. I understand it was the only option, but you should have called more men up from Winterfell. A moon wouldn't have delayed the success of the diplomatic mission. You can't risk your life like this.
This can't be what's gotten you so upset. Not after all this time.
Rob, your brother died! Promise me you will be extra careful. Please.
She pulled away from the hug to look in into his eyes.
Promise me you will be careful.
A promise, Rob said, though he was at a loss for what to do. But, Ella, please, tell me what's happening.
She bit her lip for a moment, pondering her choices, wondering how much madder Ned would be. But then she figured secrets never solved anything. And Rob, as acting Lord of Winterfell, once they return to the capital, should be aware of this.
You know that your father and I met in Harrenhal?
She asked, and Robb frowned but nodded.
Well, at the time, your Uncle Brandon was alive, and he was your mother's betrothed. Ned had no one promised to him. We were silly young people, and I got pregnant.
Robb gasped. But wait, John is younger than me. By a few months, but younger. And Harrenhal happened several months, nearly a year before my parents married. And you said you weren't his mother.
I'm not, love. I'm not. Your sister. She was born very weak. She didn't live more than a few days.
I had an older sister.
You did, love, she grimaced. I thought it was grief because your father's letters were so insufficient, so cold, because he wasn't coming, because of all the turmoil that was happening at the time. I had always been so healthy and strong, and today we found out she was never weak. She was as strong as a wolf, rather, holding on as long as she did.
Wait, don't tell me that.
I was being poisoned, Robb,
she said. He froze for a moment, letting the words sink in. Then she saw the deep anguish on his face.
Your mother had nothing to do with this, love. I doubt she even knew about the pregnancy or about the poisoning.
There was deep relief on his face.
But I need you to understand that your father first learnt the pain of losing a child before he ever got to hold you. Even worse, because when he discovered Liara even existed, she was already dead and buried. And then, Robb, you were there. You saw his reaction when it happened. Would you like to be the one to make him feel like that out of carelessness?
No! No, never!
Then be careful. Please.
I will. I promise, Ella.
She smiled a bit.
I am not aiming to take Catelyn's place, Robb. But don't put me through that either. You might not be my blood, but you are in my heart as well.
He was the one who reached to hug her this time, and they were silent for long moments.
Now, tell me, Robb started, who poisoned my sister? Who will feel himself on the bad side of ice?
She chuckled at that.
Well, between the two of us, I think that monster will be skewered by ice and dawn.
Adam took a last deep breath, adjusting his grip on the torch, before going down the steps. He had been putting it off for days now, but finally decided to be brave. His footsteps echoed in the cavernous corridors as he followed the directions from Benjen. There was a light down the corridor he wanted, and he chuckled when he got close enough to recognize who was down there.
This is not very subtle, you know, Adam said. John is not dumb, and he already knows there's something wrong with the rebellion. If he sees you here, or perhaps you should let him see you down here.
It is not a secret to tell, and you know that. Isla only rolled her eyes. I hadn't had the time to fetch new flowers from the glass house before. He smiled, seeing the winter roses she had laid down by the statue's feet.
She would have loved it. She shouldn't be in the ground, but she should.
You cannot keep feeling guilty over this, Sir Adam. It was not your fault. She was owed the truth, as regent and as your superior, and you did it as delicately as possible.
But I should have.
Has anyone ever told you, in the years since that day, I spent some time as a midwife? She asked, shocking him. I didn't know what to do then, but I do now. There is nothing about that day that I forgot. The fall might have hurried things along, but it was never going to end well. The little lord was turned the wrong way. We were always going to have to choose between one of them.
Right, he snorted. She would take a knife and open herself if you didn't choose him.
Well, she did, Isla said, and Adam turned to look at her. The other girl and I, we didn't know very well what to do. So we were hesitant. So she took the dagger she had and was going to do it. I knew she was not jesting, so I took the knife and I made the cut. The little lord came out safe and sound, but then there was too much blood everywhere. It wasn't just from the cut. It was from something inside her womb. Something had burst open in there, so we couldn't stop the bleeding. The fall might have helped in the end, or the little ward would have drowned in the blood inside her.
That tower was marked for tragedy,
Adam said, turning back to Lyanna's stony face. It wasn't a very good one. It did little justice to her beauty. Possibly, Isla said, remembering her own tragedy. She bent over and took one single blue rose, giving it to him. But she would tell us not to let things beyond our control command us. And so we mustn't. We honor her by protecting her son. Adam smiled weakly as she left. He stood there for a long time, thinking how she would have loved her son, how proud she would be of him, and her grandchildren. Oh, the mischief she and little Leah would get to.
Adam? John called, coming closer as well. Oh!
He realized what statue they stood upon.
I didn't mean to disturb you. I didn't even know you were here. I'm sorry. I'll leave you. No, it's fine, the knight said. I have paid my respects. You visit her? Often? Not often. But I felt the urge to come down. I didn't even realize I was coming to her until I saw you.
He looked at the statue.
I wish I could have known her. Adam smiled. I wish so too. You would have loved her, and she would have loved you. Very much.
John frowned.
Father said the same. The day we were leaving, I came to get him, and he was here, saying his goodbyes. He said she would have loved me. It was very hard not to love her. And a good stag that she was. She was a fierce protector of the pack. She would have loved you to pieces.
I wish she was here,
John said. So do I. The world would be a better and brighter place. But I will leave her in better company now. Ghost, Adam patted his head. Make sure he doesn't get lost, would you?
John only chuckled. Adam set the winter rose he held in the statue's hand, and, as he left, John was reminded of the feeling that took him over on the day he left Winterfell over 3 years ago. The impression that Lyanna was offering him the flower in her hand. Why had he felt so drawn to this flower? The flower that was his aunt's favourite. He remembered then his last conversation with Maester Aemon, their last sunset in Castle Black. John looked again at the snow-covered forest twinkling in the fading light of sunset.
But I know my father is no liar. If he says Prince Rhaegar didn't take Aunt Lyanna, then he didn't. So the logical explanation is that they run away together. After meeting Robert Baratheon, I can't blame Aunt Lyanna for not wanting to marry him. But she had a duty, and so did Rhaegar. He was the Prince of Dragonstone. He had a wife and children.
Maester Aemon smiled sadly.
Oh, John, if only you knew the truth, he thought. There is
one thing that you are perhaps too young to realize, John," the old man said. "Love is the bane of honor, the death of duty. What is honor compared to a woman's love? What is duty against the feel of a newborn son in your arms, or the memory of a brother's smile? Wind and words, wind and words. We are only human, and the gods have fashioned us for love. That is our great glory, and our great tragedy." "So he did it because he loved her?" John asked, flabbergasted.
He understood love just fine. Violet eyes sparkling with joy, plump red lips smiling at him, flushed cheeks filled with joy, heavy breathing in their dark bedchamber, faintly lit up from the light of the fire. If that were the only point, he could understand Mr. Raymond's words. But there were also the children. He also remembered just fine marauder violet eyes framed by dark brown curls like his, running around the place, throwing herself in his arms with a delightful cry of "Papa!" His small son kicking in his cradle, wrapping his tiny fingers around his father's and refusing to let go. If he didn't love Daenerys, a possibility John found hard to even entertain, perhaps he could leave her. But he would never be able to leave Lyanna and little Adam behind.
"If what you say is true, Maester," John said, "and I can see truth in it, then I understand. I can see Prince Rhaegar leaving his duty to his wife behind in the name of love he felt for my aunt. But I cannot understand him abandoning his children. That is just unfathomable to me. Children are our greatest blessing." "Perhaps he didn't think of it as abandoning them, rather than going on a trip before returning to them,"
the Maester said. He didn't like the tone or the resentment John seemed to feel towards Rhaegar.
"You left your children in your castle. Does that mean you have abandoned them?"
"Most certainly not," John said incisively.
"Only Rhaegar can speak for his actions, John, and no one else. And as terrible or as great as they were, I think it's safe to say that he loved his Lady Lyanna. More than was sensible, certainly more than he should, but that was his doom. But for as much as you love your Lady Daenerys, can you blame him?"
Patting John's forearm in farewell, the Maester made his way back to the elevator. John remained at the top of the world, watching darkness swallow all the warmth of light below.
"Was that what happened?"
John asked the statue, coming back to the present time, though he knew he would have no reply.
"Did he leave his wife, but not his children? Would you have loved them as your own, rather than belittle them for not being yours?"
He snorted.
"Look at me, talking to a statue. I guess you never had the time."
He turned to leave, but then a question arose. How had Lyanna Stark died? Because if she and Rhaegar loved each other, then he hadn't killed her. And if Adam told her of the prince's death, it was because she had outlived him. But what had happened? He knew Adam wouldn't tell him, not when his standard response to anything related to that was,
"That is a question for your father."
But could he ask that? When father shrugged any questions on the matter? When he turned introspective and skirted any questions about his sister? Would perhaps Uncle Benjen answer? The humidity from the crypts made a droplet roll down the statue's face, as if Lyanna were crying, and John shivered. That seemed too real. Benjen rushed down the corridor to his brother's solar. Maester Lewin had just found him in the training yard, and said he should go there. That Lord Stark would need a friendly shoulder, though he should beware that the man had thrown the Maester, Jory, and even Ella out of the room. He was unwilling to disclose much on the subject, but when he asked how bad it was, he had simply said,
Bad enough that heads will certainly roll.
Ned! Benjamin called as he knocked. He sent us all out and asked not to be disturbed, my lord, Jory asked, and if I may be so bold, I don't blame him.
7 hells, he muttered. Ned, stop being stubborn and open this door, he yelled, but there was no response from within. Very well. I know Ella won't tell me anything, so I have no choice but to knock down the door.
Go away, little brother,
came the weak, muffled response from inside. Fat chance of that. Open up or I am serious. I will knock it down. Silver came down the corridor then and sat next to Benjamin, who smiled. The direwolf had a key between his teeth. Likely he had left the room through the other door and came to deliver. So the man took the key and opened the door, stopping short. He knew Ned had some violent tendencies when he was angry, hence the many straw dummies he had destroyed over the years with a training sword. But he had never destroyed anything other than dummies. Certainly knocked over every single piece of furniture in his solar.
That was stupid of me,
Ned said in a dejected voice.
I shouldn't have torn down the place.
He was the image of despair when Benjamin finally saw him. His jerkin was torn open, his hair in disarray, pulled from the knot he usually held it in, and his face awash in tears as he rested against the floor, against the cabinet.
Big brother, what happened?
They killed her, Ben,
Ned said, fresh tears rolling down his cheeks.
My baby girl, mine and Ashara's. She wasn't weak. She was poisoned. They killed her.
Benjamin knelt on the floor in front of him. I'm sorry, Ned.
Who did it? Who would do something so odious? And whatever for? Citadel. It's a conspiracy, Ben. They killed her because the Danes are Targaryen supporters, and they wanted them away from the war. They had Lyanna and Robert betrothed to rise in rebellion from the start, and so Danes and Starks had to be enemies. My child with Ashara was an inconvenience, so they killed her.
All right. Fine. It's even worse than someone wanting to get back at you. This is no reason other than petty cruelty. Give me 100 men, and I will go right now to Old Town and set those bastards alight. Well, or I'll just behead them, one by one. The books are blameless. Ned laughed amidst his tears.
I don't know how to handle this, Ben. This thing hurting inside. I can only handle simple things. See the enemy, kill the enemy. This hurts.
That thing is your heart, and, in this case, it should hurt. But, hey, look at me. There is one good thing about this.
How can there ever be something good about the Maesters conspiring against House Targaryen and murdering my daughter for it?
Since you found out Liara existed, you have blamed yourself, because that is what you do. You thought the gods had taken her from you, because you had turned your back on your sister, because you had married a woman promised to your brother. None of this is, or ever was, true. A band of crazy, cruel men murdered her out of hatred. So, get up, wash your face, and let's find some knowledgeable, stupid people to bring to justice. Besides, I don't know if it has occurred to you, but while you have been here destroying perfectly good furniture and sitting down feeling sorry for yourself, there is someone else who is feeling just as miserable as you are. The woman who carried that little girl, suffered the hells to bring her into the world, held and fed and loved her, only to have her die in her arms days later. So, if you want to wallow in pity, don't wallow in self-pity. At least, go be with your wife.
Thanks, little brother. Ned said after a moment, rubbing his eyes clean. That was a well-given kick to the arse.
"Ah, son, up we go," Benjamin said, pulling him upwards. "You can go to Ella, and I will call the maids."
Thanks, Ben.
That's what brothers are for. Now, shoot! End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that one. Oh my god, I really want to punch a few people right now, even though they are fictional. They murdered an innocent little girl in her mother's womb. Few things more earn my rage. But I like Benjamin at the very end there, giving him the whoop up the ass he needed. And the fact that the Winterfell Maester now is not in on it really, really does well. And I like that Jory's got his back to the nth degree. Talk about the silent MVP. And poor Ella. I love this bit about her being the loving stepmother. I've said it before. But her going to Rob, or rather Rob going to her and asking if she's alright too. Well, he's the son she should have had, I think. And finding out he had a big sister and immediately like, what? Yeah. That baby girl's getting avenged, don't worry. Anyway, you guys know the drill. Like, comment and subscribe and hit that bell to get notified for whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye my guys, gals and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Take care.